Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello. All right, so we're going to do another nice project today, and I'm going to be making a top. And I'm actually going to show you the fabric first because it was the fabric that drove me to choose the pattern this time. And this is it. It is a 100% cotton flannel, but it's fabulous. It's got this really neat texture, fabulous colors. And I was like, oh, well, I have to have that. But, you know, I've just done a traditional flannel shirt. I've just done that other top. So I want to do something different with it. And because this plaid is so bright and so bold, I wanted the plaid itself to be the focal point of the top and not the pattern so much. So I wanted a plain pattern. And this is the one I chose. There you go. And it is very, very plain in the front. It has a few sleeve variations. And I'm actually going to try to do this one, which looks like it comes a little bit lower and has a little vent opening there. All right, so let's get started. So I just opened it up for the first time, and I'm looking, and I'm not doing this version, but it's an interesting sleeve with the tie and everything, the way it's a two-part sleeve with the big tie incorporated. That is kind of neat. Might want to do that later. It's very basic. We have a front, a back, a sleeve, and some facings. So not a big deal at all. I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. Now, for sizing, it looks like, so like say here, for view 16, it has a 38-inch bust is what it calls for. But if you come all the way down here, the final garment bust is 45, all right? So there's 8 inches of ease at that bust. So, you know, use that as a judgment when you're picking out your pattern, because see the shoulder seams, they're not straight on top of the shoulders. They're kind of a drop shoulder. So between the drop shoulderness of it and the large amount of ease in the bust, you know, I would not go up for sure. It might even be a pattern that you can go down a size, but I'm just going to do my basic size because I want to be able to move around comfortably, and just wanted to point that out. Okay, so I bought, foolishly, admitted, foolishly, an 1/8 of a yard, actually less than what this pattern calls for. And I think that's because I looked at the back wrong, because I was toying between a couple different views. And so between that, between pre-washing, because it is 100% cotton flannel, and between matching plaids, I'm going to make it work, but everything's just going to be, you know, very, very close. So first of all, the layout. This pattern is a little bit different than a lot of them because the front and back are cut on a fold. And the way they want you to lay it out is put the front, so this is a little fold right here. So I folded it up, here's a selvage. So this part is a fold piece and then a sleeve, and then another fold piece and another sleeve, okay? And I have measured my sleeve, And it doesn't actually mark on the pattern piece the finished sleeve width like they usually do. And it's a little bit hard to judge exactly because it is kind of a drop shoulder. So even though it looks like this is where the bicep, highest part of the bicep should be, it actually might be closer to here. So I just put a tape on there, measured it. It's going to be fine. I think I have a couple inches of ease at least, so that's okay. But if I need to, I'll be able to shorten it, okay? And so I need to scoot this up so you can see. So basically I put my sleeve piece on here so I could see the place where it is, where I could get the biggest fold. So when I put my sleeve piece on here, this tip came to right there. So I know that that is the place where I can fold this piece up to. I have that much room to play with. So I'm just going to move this for right now and grab one of my front pieces. So this pattern, this plaid I should say, has a very, very wide repeat. You know, it's very wide. But if I need to, because I did pick a longer version of the top, I can shorten it to make it work with the repeat so that it'll work with the size fabric that I have. I'm just kind of trying to get this to match up here. All right, so with this being my top up here, and it is placed on a fold, the first question is, will it even fit? Because sometimes the width shrinks when you pre-wash it. And yes, it does. I am right there. So I will be able to make this work. Now, if I push this all the way to the top, what I want to watch for is where this point meets, this underarm point meets. Because if I'm going to match plaids, this is the part that needs to match. Up here, not so much, but from here, so it's continuous all the way around, this does. So if I put this up at the highest place possible on my piece of fabric that I have here, and this is my back piece, I can see that my underarm is about 1/2 inch into the black square. So let me just put a couple pins to hold this in place while I move things around. So let me scoot her down so you can see. And get this part lined up. And again, I have this edge lined up with this little line on this check and making sure the stripes that are going this way match. So if I need to get my underarm point to be in a black square, this is about the closest one I'm going to get because my fabric ends, well, right here. It's not very long. So if I put this piece on and I need it to be 1/2 inch into there, will it work? Kind of is my answer. I put it so this is in the same spot as it is up there, I can see that I am into my top up here about 1.5 inches. All right, so in order to make this pattern work, I am going to shorten both of these pieces by, I would say, 2 inches, just to be safe. And I did cut the longer version, so that's going to be fine. So the way I'm going to do that is right here on this double line where it's the lengthen and shorten here is usually the double line. If I need to shorten it 2 inches, that means I need to make a fold that is 1 inch because it's half. So I'm going to put my ruler here, fold the whole thing straight up, and then fold it back down at that 1 inch line, which is right there. And press that flat, get a piece of tape, I'm just going to put a couple little pieces of tape on here to hold it. And I'm going to shorten the top the same way. And by doing that, then I should be able to put both of these at this point, where this point is 1/2 inch into this black square, and everything's going to work out. All right, so now I'm going to work on my sleeves. So this is the row that has that black square that I have my underarm seam 1/2 inch up into, okay? So this point here is what matches up with that one on the bodice. So if I can place this pattern piece so that this point on either side is in the same row, the same point in the same row as the other one, I'm going to have the same plaids matching up. So here's my bodice, here's my bodice, and this stripe is going to continue all the way across the bodice and into the sleeves. That's the goal. So I believe that I'm going to have plenty of room to do that and be able to cut out my facings, and I can see through here to the straight of grain. So that's what I'm going to do. So just making sure I get this point at the same place that I matched the bodice point right there. Okay, so I have this piece cut. So now what I'm going to do, so I can get the opposite side, is take this and flip it upside down, place this on top of it, and make these plaids match up. So here's this stripe here, and I can kind of see through my paper where the plaids are matching. I'm on a different path this way, okay? These are in a different spot. It's these, the horizontal ones, that I'm concerned about. So if you see, and like here, there's the yellow squares here and there's yellow squares there, that doesn't bother me. It's this way that I'm trying to get lined up. So just give me one more minute here. So you can probably see better if I peel this back what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is get this line here to blend in there, and so on and so forth. Because this fabric, you know, it is a little bit shifty. I can kind of just mold it as I go. And see how these, even though they're different colors, they are in line. That's what I'm going for. Now the bottom, when I cut the bottom of this, it's interesting because I didn't come to an exact point on the plaid print that was exactly on the straight. Let me move you down. So the bottom of my cut is actually a little bit off, and that's going to bother me. So I am just going to straighten that up. This is where it was according to the pattern, where it was a little bit up here and a little bit down there. When I cut these, I'm just going to cut it straight on both of them. I'm shortening everything by probably about 1/4 inch, but that way I end up with a bottom of a sleeve that is on the straight according to the plaid. So let me cut this piece out and the facings. All right, so everything's cut out. So the first thing I'm going to do is work on stabilizing these pieces. The instructions call for stay stitching up here. I'm actually going to use a fusible stay tape, as I do, and I'm going to be placing it just at the neckline, okay, on both the front and back pieces, and I'll show you that. But my fabric, you know, it's very, very busy. So to help me with marking at these dots here, which is going to be the sleeve placement dots, I'm just going to put a little piece of tape, because that way I can pull it off, but that is going to be very easy for me to see on a fabric like this, whereas a dot or a slash or something like that would not be. And if I put my piece of tape on just one of the sides, like here and here, then I also have a good indication of what I'm considering the right side. It doesn't really matter that much for this piece because it is very symmetrical, but sometimes that helps. So I'm going to go over to my ironing board, and I'm going to do the same type of thing for the back. Okay, so the stay tape I'm using, I bought on Etsy, and now I cannot remember the seller's name. Sorry about that. It's just a stay tape that's cut on a bias, and then it has a little band or a little tape that's on a straight stitch to it. And if I can remember who that seller was, I'll pass that on, but right now I can't. I've said it in other videos though, so you might have that. So what I'm doing is I want this to be inside of where I'm going to be stitching in the seam allowance, but I want the actual stabilizing tape part to be where my stitching is going to be. So I'm going to place it so that this stitched tape area is just about at 5/8. And you know, it's not exact, but if I place it so it's about 1/4 inch from the edge in, I think I'll get there. And because it's cut on a bias, I can just turn it as I go. Now, of course, you need to make sure that you're putting it down right with the fusible side down and not up, because then you iron it onto your iron, and that is not fun. And then when I get over here towards the end and I can see about how much I need, I'm just going to clip it off. And if you're asking me why I'm doing this instead of stay stitching, the answer is because I want to. And really it's just as simple as that. All right. Got a little extra here, and now this is stabilized, it's ready to go, and it's going to be nice and flat. So that's what it looks like close up, okay? And these are my little marking tapes, so I know this is my right side, this is my wrong side. My wrong side has the stay tape on it. I'm going to do the exact same thing to my back piece, and I am then going to go over to my serger and serge all the way around each piece because this stuff will fray. Okay, I just love this plaid. It's so pretty. Okay, the next thing I need to do is sew my shoulder seams together. Now, you can see this is not really a symmetrical plaid, but if you cut your, even an asymmetrical plaid, meaning it's not the same one way or another, you know, next to this yellow is an orange here and a green here, just kind of rotates through the rainbow. This one is going to match it. Where's my top? Where's my top? Here it is. All right, so this one is going to match it, all right? And that is because when I laid them out, the center front and the center back were both placed on the exact same fold. So because of that, I'm going to have the same thing, obviously, on either side. So even though this shoulder doesn't match this shoulder, they match each other. So just make sure when you're placing them, if you have a plaid like this, see how that doesn't match that, but it does match this. So make sure when you're placing them that you keep an eye on that, but it will work itself out. It's kind of a neat thing there. Now when I'm going to go to pin it, I am going to look at it closely from the top and just again just adjusting it as I go so that at that seam allowance the lines are going to meet up. So if I have to, you know, offset it by 1/8 of an inch here or there or something, that's okay. The blouse will still be made, but to me it's a little more important that all those lines are going to match up than having the ends be exactly at the same point. So like here, making sure that lines up. And I'm just putting a pin at each little plaid intersection. So just like that, everything's matched up. I'm going to go ahead and stitch it as normally at 5/8 and then press this open, do the same thing for this side. All right, so when I pressed it open, you can see that everything is matching up really well right there. So pleased with that. I'm going to put that aside for a minute because I need to cut out the interfacing for my back and front facings. And I'm going to use my favorite, there we go, can we focus? Very lightweight fusible interfacing. There you go. I think this says 99 cents a yard, but when I was at the store the other day, it's gone up to $1.29 a yard. So buy in bulk and save money. Anyway, I need to cut one of each of these on a fold and fuse them to the pieces. So now that I have this side ironed enough that I can tell it's all the little fusey dots are melted, I'm going to come back over, flip it onto this side, and give it one more pass. And I need to finish off the bottom of my facings. I'm going to come around the bottom edge and just serge this edge just to give it a nice clean finish. And now that I have both of them serged and everything, I'm going to sew them together up at the shoulders and do that at 5/8 and then press these seam allowances open. All right, so this is my facing. Now on the pattern, they want you to take the edge and turn it under 1/4 inch and then stitch it so that on the inside it looks really nice. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do that, and especially because I have it serged, it's very easy to turn it. So I'm just going to turn it under and then run a row of top stitching like 1/16 of an inch in, just to finish off the outside edge. We're not worrying about this part on the inside edge yet. And I'm going to switch over to a narrow foot just so that I can see that edge very carefully as I'm going around. I like to play with different feet, but it isn't necessary. You can use a regular one if you want to. I just like this because the hole that the needle goes through is 1/16 of an inch from the outside edge, so it's a very simple gauge. And up here on these corners, I'm going to go ahead and clip at a diagonal the seam allowances from underneath here like that so that they're not going to get in my way. And I'm going to start in the back. This is the back. I can tell because it's not as deep. I'm just going to turn it under, and I'm going to be doing this actually from the top side. So I'm going to place the edge of my foot at the edge of my fold here. Get a couple stitches started, a couple back, and just as I go, I'm just going to turn it under very carefully and go. All the way around. Okay, so with this all pressed under nicely, I need to attach it to my shirt. And because I was matching plaids here, you know, I have it, it's not exactly matching, but that doesn't bother me. It's less than 1/8 of an inch difference, so it's going to work out. I just need to make sure that I match up the seam placement and the centers, and everything else is going to work out. Once I have it all pinned on here, I'm going to sew it around here at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so I've got this sewed all the way around at 5/8, and I need to come back in here before I can understitch it and make clips, because this is a very round neckline, so that it's going to open up. You can see it's thick. But that way, when I go to understitch it, it's going to flex nicely so I can get a nice straight understitching. So let me go ahead and trim it all the way around here. You know, where the curve is more dramatic, you make them closer. Where it's pretty straight, you can make them farther. Just use your own judgment. And while I'm making those clips, I'm coming in here in the seam allowance side and just taking off the extra bulk in these areas also. So there's less to turn under and understitch, like that. And in case anyone loves the flannel and wants to know, I bought it at Joann's, and I think it's part of their Platitudes line. I believe so. So anyhow, it's there right now. I'm not sure how long it lasts. But what I'm going to do now is push the entire seam allowance towards the facing side, because as always, the understitching goes on the side that nobody should see. So this is private side, this is public side. So all of the seam allowance goes towards the facing, and I'm going to stitch it over here, right about there, all the way around. And as I stitch, I actually look at this side while I'm stitching, and so as I'm feeding it through, I just kind of make sure that everything's going the right direction and just do a straight stitch all the way around the neckline. All right, so I have pressed it. So this is the outside, and I think it looks really nice. The understitching is right here, and what that is doing is pulling everything towards the inside, pulling this upper edge in so it's curling in, so that you don't see any of the facing on the outside, and on the inside it looks really neat. So what they want you to do right now is secure the facing down with hand stitching, hand basting all the way across. And they want you to do it, I'm gonna get my thimble here. They want you to do it with big stitches pretty much at the stitching line that you just made, or that I just made when I was turning under that facing, okay? Just to get it there. And then once that is done, they want you to come back on this side and run a row of top stitching by machine all the way around. So you have a seam line that's going to go right there, okay? That's what they want you to do. Now, am I going to do that? Not exactly. Not exactly. I'm going to do something a little bit different. And have you ever gone to like the fabric store and they have all of those pretty beads on sale, and you buy some and you just have no idea what you're going to do with them, so you just start collecting them? And I have done that. And I am actually going to I have these little really pretty, they look almost metallic, they're multicolored and everything. It's like, well, why don't I use that here? And I was actually playing with these also, but I think I'm going to stick with the beads. So on the outside, instead of doing a machine top stitching, I'm actually going to stitch this by hand, but every time I come up on this side, I'm going to catch a little bead. So I'm just going to, along this whole little curve right here where this edge is, I'm going to have these guys. So I'll be doing it as a back stitch, so I'll come up, put a bead on my needle, back stitch it down, and then come up and work that way all the way around. And I am going to be using a double thread and waxed and everything like that to try to make sure it stays very, very secure. Once I get across the front, I'll look at it and figure out if I want to do the back that way or not. The only thing about beads on the back is sometimes your hair gets caught in it, so that's no fun, you know. But again, I'll make that judgment call when I get the front done, and if it looks like beads would be a bad idea on the back, then I'll just make some little invisible hand stitches coming across the back. But on their pattern, you can see they show that little top stitching line. So that's how you would do it. If that's what you wanted, is you would come through, baste it while looking at this side, and then on this side, use that basting thread as a machine guide to run your machine top stitching. So because I'm not basting it, I am just drawing a guideline on here with my heat erasable pen, so I can remove it easily, and that way it's going to give me something to look at while I'm stitching from the right side. And I can kind of feel that that is the very edge of the fabric. So if I'm using this as a guideline and I put my beads on the inside of it, I think I should be just fine. And as I sew it, I can feel it from underneath to make sure that I'm staying on track. But it's going to be something kind of like this, just, you know, little beads sprinkled all the way around. All right, so I have it all sewn in. So the back, I just did some little invisible stitches. This line is my heat erasable line. I need to iron it, and then that will disappear. This is the front. I ended up just doing 2 little rows of beads, and that is doing the dual purpose of making it look cute, but also holding down the facing in here, so that's not going to flare up. Hopefully it's very, very secure so it can go through the wash. And now it's time to get started with our sleeves. So I'm just going to move this up here out of the way and grab my sleeve pieces. Got them here. Now it's important on this to keep track of what is the front and what is the back. The back always has more notches than the front, so I know this is my back. So before I even take my pattern piece off, what I'm going to do is put a piece of tape on the back on the right side, okay? And that way I know that what I'm dealing with, because it's very easy, especially with something that doesn't have a right or wrong side, and I need to make sure I keep everything straight, that when I see the yellow tape, that is the back and that is the right side. So enough of that. What I'm going to do before I mark any of these sleeve placement dots or anything is serge around the edge. And when I serge around the edge, what that means is that I am just barely taking stray threads off. You know, I'm not cutting, I'm not going down and cutting strips of fabric off. My blade is just barely skimming the outside edge. It's just to overcast, reinforce, and clean up the edge so it's not going to unravel on me, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that to both of these pieces. Okay, so this is just one layer of sleeve here. I serged all around it, and I want to mark these three positions, the shoulder and the two other placement dots. And I'm just going to once again use my tape. Very easy to put on, very easy to see, and if I sew over it, it kind of just perforates it so I can pull it back off again. So, you know, that is how it works for me today. So that is in general where those three dots are. I can see it through my pattern that I have them placed right. There are two more dots over here, but if you look, the dot is at the seam allowance. So if I have a seam allowance coming up this way and a seam allowance going this way, it's where those two 5/8 marks meet is where this dot is. So I can just kind of eyeball that one. I'm not going to put another tape there because that one could get, with too many things stitched over, it can get a little messy. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and place this into my bodice. Okay, so here is my bodice. I just have it opened up. My side seams are still open here, okay? You can tell this is the front because it's got the beads. Here's my shoulder seam. So here is my sleeve with those three spots marked. No tape there. There is tape here, so I know this is my back side and the right side. So this is going over here, okay? Because right side and back side to right side and back side. So the first thing I'm going to match up is my shoulder up here at the very top. And put a little pin right there. Then I have another dot right about here. And I'm not going to get terribly fanatical about matching these to the 1/16 of an inch because there is some give in this woven, but I don't need to run gathering stitches or anything. It's a pretty straightforward little sleeve. This is going to wrap around and come down here. Now, where that dot was at that 5/8 inch down, I'm paying attention to that point right now because that's where I want to start making sure that my plaids are matching again. So you can kind of see where this stripe is supposed to match up with that stripe. All right, so I'm actually going to be, when I pin it, this side's going to be down just a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch or so, just so that these two plaids are going to match up exactly there as I stitch that seam coming this way. Okay, so I'm going to want it to come down to where this plaid is. That's the 5/8 that I want it to come to, but making sure that that line is meeting up there. So the rest of this on the sleeve, it's not as critical. I can just make it work, smoosh it together, as you say, and pin it and sew this whole seam at 5/8 of an inch all the way across. Do that for both sides. All right, so I've sewed it on and I think it looks fine. I don't see any problems with it. Just got that first seam on. Now here's the thing, the instructions are telling me that they want me to sew this seam again 1/8 of an inch in. So here's my seam, my first seam. They want me to do 1/8 of an inch in here, do another seam, and then trim very close to that. I'm seeing that in instructions a lot lately. I'm not a fan, and I think I'm going to do something a little bit differently. The whole point of the second row of stitching, the way they're doing it, is just to keep it from unraveling. And by taking it down to 1/8 of an inch, it takes out some bulk. But this is the thing I'm seeing. This is a very loose seam. It's not like a very set-in sleeve that's, you know, an extreme like that. It's not like that at all. It's almost straight when it comes down here. So there's not a whole lot of curve right here. And if I wanted to get the seam allowances flattened out and everything reinforced, because what they want you to do is after you trim it, press the seam allowances towards the sleeve. And I'm all for that. I like the way that seam allowances press towards the sleeve. I like the way that that helps shape up here, okay? But I'm not going to trim it because this fabric, it would fray out too much. So here's my sleeve folded in half. So the first option is just leave it as it is because the sleeve's fine, there's not going to be any problems. Or I can push the seam allowances towards the sleeve and run a row of stitching from the outside so I would see it, it would hold it flat, and it would help push it out towards the sleeve. I could do that too, but I don't want to because I don't have top stitching showing anywhere else right now, so it's not, you know, exactly right that way. Oh, let me show you this though. This is something that I was trying to do, and I haven't tried it yet, so let's see how successful I am. If this is my sleeve coming this way, when the arm is down, my thought was it would be like this and kind of match up that way. So, you know, kind of successful. We'll see how it looks when I actually have it on, but that was my thought. So what I've decided to do is just leave it like this without the second row stitching because I'm not going to be trimming it, because I don't think it's going to be a problem because my sleeve is very straight. It's not an extreme curved set-in sleeve. I will go over to my ironing board right now before I do anything else to it though and press it very carefully so the seam allowance is going towards the sleeve and all of this is flattened out as much as possible. I have ironed this, it looks really nice. And down here at the bottom, the view that I'm doing is supposed to have a little vent opening on the side. I did not mark this beforehand because I had shortened it up here. And I wanted to make sure that where my final vent opening place would be, it would be okay. I didn't know if I was going to need to lower it or anything. So I just held this up to my body, and I think that actually, you know, because of my own proportions, this placement is still going to be fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a little clip at that point so that I can keep track of that right now. Okay, so now that I have my little clip on the line where I'm going to leave it open from that point down, I'm going to turn this inside out and fold all of these edges together here from the sleeve all the way down. So actually I'm going to start by matching up my underarm. And remember, the seam allowances are going towards the sleeve, and I'm just going to be matching up that seam and hoping that everything is going to line up. So I'm going to also be paying attention to my plaids to try to make sure my plaids are matched up. So kind of ignoring the notches in favor of matching the plaids. That's a little more important to me right now. And at this line, the center of this plaid here, that's where I'm going to be stopping. So let me match up my plaids up here and my sleeve also. Love plaids, love a good match, you know, it's very satisfying. And it looks like everything is pairing up very well. So I'll get this pinned, sew it at 5/8 of an inch all the way down, and then I'm going to come back in this underarm area and re-stitch it. Over the same line of stitching, it's just going to be stitched over twice, probably about that much, just to reinforce it so that nothing will be tempted to pull itself loose. All right, so I've got that underarm seam sewed. I went back and forth a couple times here just to make sure that this part here is reinforced, and pressed it open. So like on the sleeve, just kind of opened it up like that, pressed it in the middle without the iron touching the sides, and that way, you know, you can get this without using a seam roll or anything. Pressed open the side seams here, hang on. So I pressed the side seam open, and now before I do the bottom hem, I need to deal with this vent opening. So on the instructions, what they want you to do, I went ahead and pressed it once while I was pressing this open, but they want you to go ahead and turn this edge underneath and put a row of stitching right along the edge. And then once you get up to the top, just kind of let it unfold itself. I'm going to stitch to just past where the opening starts. Okay, so it'll be for sure closed from that point down, and then after that it'll just naturally want to come open, and I will let it. All right, so on my bottom here, where are you? Of my bodice, I have stitched it up, came over at the very top, and then came back down on this side. So from the outside, you know, my thread, even though it's dark blue, it kind of blends because this is such a busy plaid, so that's good. Now back over here on my sleeves, on the pattern for my view, there's a fold line here that I need to fold onto, and that looks like it's just under 3 inches. So I'm going to measure my sleeve, because I did cut the bottom of my sleeve with the plaid. So I can say what's just under 3 inches is actually the top of this line. So I'm just going to use that line as a guide and fold everything up this way. And it looks like I need to turn under the very top edge, kind of like we did at the facing at the very top. So I have it folded up here, and what I'm going to do is go to my ironing board, press this before I do anything so I can set this crease where it's supposed to be down here, and then I need to come back up and attach this. So what they want you to do is fold it under, and I'm going to pin it right there. Look how pretty that matches. Oh, that is so nice. Anyway, I'm going to pin it like there, and then I'm going to come across and just stitch it right here just to hold it in place, and then on the right side it's going to be nicely finished right there. All right, so I just changed my mind, and yes, using a machine stitch around that cuff is very, very acceptable, no problems there. But I've decided that since I did this up here, I'm going to try to tie this into the cuffs. So, and I have plenty of beads, so I'm actually going to do something similar to that right around here when I'm stitching this up by hand. So it's just going to match, but you know, doing it by machine is perfectly acceptable. But I just figured since I have this going on up here, why not tie it in? And I have these, when I put them on back stitched, and I use fairly short threads. So I do like this section and then have a knot, and then another small section and have a knot. So just in case one little part comes loose, the whole thing doesn't disappear. And I think that it's going to be real secure. You can kind of see my little back stitches all over the back, but you know, that's not going to show. So anyway, let me go ahead, get these put on, and I'll be right back. So this is what my little sleeves look like, you know, just because it kind of matches the neckline. It's a little extra, it's a little fun. I love it. It holds up my hem really well, and that is good. So the very last thing to do on this is to hem it. Now you can see when I cut it out with the pattern, it was a little bit curved. So my plaid is not exactly on track there. And I'm actually going to fold my hem just to even it out. The pattern says it comes with a 1-inch hem. 1 inch from the highest point is at this little portion of the plaid right there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to my ironing board, fold it like this and press it. It's going to be the same on the back with this little stripe here. And press it really well so I have that nice crease. All right, so now that I have it pressed up to what the pattern calls for a hem, I'm actually going to, no I'm not. I was going to trim it, but it's going to get tucked in. So even though this is a different height here, I'm just going to tuck it under evenly. It'll be different heights underneath, obviously. And you could come back and trim it even, you know, but I don't think that's really necessary right here. So I'm just going to tuck it under, pin it, and then I will be coming back with the sewing machine and machine stitching it across the very top up here. Now over here at the ends, you can see that's a lot of thickness right there, and that's going to make a very bulky little spot. And so what I'm going to do is I can see where the top of this fold is, okay? Just on the inside of it, I'm going to clip it. So that top should still curl under a little bit, and I am just taking this whole little chunk out of here. Okay, now to make sure that this is not going to fray on me, I'm going to put my clear nail polish on it. You can use fray check, you can use glue, you know, but clear nail polish is my go-to, just, you know, the standard dollar store stuff, you know. Because once that dries, it's going to work to keep everything together, but I am going to be able to still curl it underneath and pin it into place, but that way I've only got the 2 layers there, and that's going to sew a whole lot easier. So I want to show you one thing I decided to do. This is the wrong side, obviously, and I did machine stitch this hem, but I wasn't really happy with the look of my thread, okay, especially on the plaid. So what I did is when I sewed it, I changed my bobbin thread to be yellow because it was going to be matching up in the yellow. And because I did that, now that whole stitching line is pretty invisible. So instead of having a little thin, you know, dark colored line there, the yellow just kind of blends it in. So it's going to be the same thing. I haven't done the other side yet, but it's going to be the same thing where it should be lining up just at the bottom edge of this yellow. So I'm just going to stitch that also, and then we'll be done. Alrighty, so here she is, the very, very colorful flannel top. Here's a close-up of the neckline, the sleeves, the drop sleeves. See how the seam is way down here. Here is the bottom cuff, the opening at the edge down here. We're going to turn her around. Here she is from the side. From the back. Go. So I hope you like this little top. It is very basic, but I just wanted to show you because I love this flannel, very colorful, and you know how simple it is to match plaids because this is just straight, no darts, no nothing like that. It's very easy to get a really nice match. So I hope you like that. And I just felt like being a little extra with the beads because I dearly love beads and things like that. Sorry for touching my microphone. I do that and I don't think about how it sounds later, but anyway. Anyhow, I know it's easy and I know it's quick, but sometimes if you have a really fun, bold, extravagant fabric, I don't want to complicate that too much with a pattern that has a whole bunch of little intricate seaming and everything. And so something like this, the reason I picked it is I can just let the pattern on the fabric speak for itself. So anyway, hope you liked it. See you next time. Bye-bye.
bucolic life. Free, healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.